April 16, 1919, the German Admiralty was instructed to create the Provisional Reichsmarine, and only several months later, the scuttling of the High Seas Fleet took place. Subsequently, any new German warship had to replace a ship condemned to the scrap from a list of the most modern remaining after the scuttling. The German Navy was cut down drastically in fulfilling Versailles. The Navy was restricted to a standing force of 15,000 men who crewed obsolete pre-dreadnoughts, and critical to our story, the Reichsmarine was allowed to have 6 light cruisers. These light cruisers were not to displace more than 6,000 tons, and the armament was not to exceed 15 centimeters or 5.9 inches. When the existing cruisers of the Gazelle class had been in service for 20 years, they could be replaced by a new vessel. Of these new vessels, we will discuss the last light cruiser built by the Reichsmarine and Kriegsmarine, the Nürnberg. During her career, like the preceding K-class cruisers, she was confined to European waters due to the limitations of her construction, and in the early part of World War II, she helped lay mines, and after helping to escort destroyers, took a torpedo which put her out of commission for the Norwegian campaign in early 1940. On February 7, 1941, German Naval High Command issued instructions for the reclassification of the remaining light cruisers as training ships, and with a few exceptions, she didn't participate in many more operations. However, when the war ended, she was seized by Allied forces, and per the terms of the Potsdam Agreement, the German fleet was split among the powers, and Nürnberg entered Soviet service as Admiral Makarov, and served as a training vessel until being decommissioned in 1960, being the longest-serving Kriegsmarine cruiser. The development of light cruisers for the Reichsmarine was pretty much immediate following their creation, with the development of the Emden, based on the plans for the Karlsruhe of the former Köln class of the old Imperial German Navy, with provisions to allow lessons and experiences drawn from the First World War. The Emden came under strict supervision from the Allied Control Commission, who refused to approve the initial 2 designs, resulting in the 8 5.9-inch guns being placed into single gun houses. All this to say, the Emden followed mostly along the lines of old Imperial cruisers, while the K-class and the succeeding class were a fresh development for the German Navy. Following the proven system of longitudinal bulkheads, correspondingly, the ship was comprehensively subdivided into watertight compartments, the hull being protected by light waterline armor. The armor of the cruiser was relatively standard for the time as regards light cruisers. Still, it improved through war experience and new alloys. The ships carried 9 15cm 5.9-inch guns and triple turrets. The rear turrets, unlike the preceding K-class, the turrets were along the center line of the ship. 4 triple torpedo tubes, along with various anti-aircraft guns. While the machinery consisted of 6 oil-fired double-ended water tube boilers, which provided steam for 2 turbines that drove 2 shafts. In addition, the vessels were equipped with a cruising diesel engine, with Leipzig's diesel causing problems throughout her career. A change to the ships was the central shaft for the cruising diesel, which was designed to overcome the difficulty of the K-class, wherein the drive had to either be turbine or diesel, but not both simultaneously. Using their full power, the ships could achieve around 32 knots. Their machinery again differed from the previous German designs, namely Emden. Their engine rooms were uncomplicated and generally reliable. An important change from the K-class is something Gerhard Koop and Klaus-Peter Schmolke discussed in their book German Light Cruisers of World War II, Warships of the Kriegsmarine. The displacement infringed treaty limitations considerably, whereas the K-class had only been marginally in excess. The usual excuse that the extra weight was also equivalent to that of all guns was not mentioned. Both ships were shorter on the waterline and beamier than the K-class. The broader beam made a different arrangement possible for the engine room. For the same number of boilers, there were only 3 boiler rooms. The armor scheme in Leipzig and Nürnberg differed little from the 3 earlier ships. Still, it was better arranged, as the form of the main armor frame differed. The armor deck curved down short of the sides to meet the side of the belt armor inside the lateral bulges, and was very pronounced on Nürnberg. Something that the other cruisers didn't enjoy by the time Nürnberg was complete was the advantages of the 1935 Anglo-German Naval Agreement that was in place already. Having the ability to put on larger and more sophisticated fire controls, as the weight restrictions weren't so strict. Before we get into Nürnberg's particulars, another quote is apt to share from Koop and Schmolke. They write, "The 5 latter German light cruisers were children of their time, the result of what designers had found possible to engineer within the limitations of the Washington Agreement, and a vast improvement on Emden except as regards seaworthiness. The great weakness of the K-cruisers, Königsberg, Köln, and Karlsruhe, was their light construction. The fault lay not with the designers, but in the restrictions of the Versailles Treaty. Leipzig and Nürnberg were equally as suspect with their construction, having the hulls 90% welded, with a double bottom length of 83%. The problems with their light construction came to a head in 1936 when Karlsruhe barely survived a hurricane in the Pacific. Because of that, the five cruisers were limited to the North Sea and eventually some European waters, but only in fine weather periods. Something that reared its ugly head in the K class, but was certainly present in the latter two light cruisers, was issues with stability. At all times, the forward and aft fuel bunkers had to be emptied first, and their fuel was so important to stability that the amount aboard could not fall below a certain amount, meaning that they had to have refueling frequently, and thus useless as commerce raiders. Hoop and Schmolke go on to discuss how, when it comes to different military requirements of hitting power and ability to take punishment, great range, and long endurance at sea, they could not meet all of those requirements. Compromises needed to be made somewhere. Thus, the ships lacked robustness, coming to a head in rough seas where the weakness of the construction was shown. Leipzig and Nürnberg were somewhat improved over the preceding K class, but the issues from the limitations of Versailles were still present and limited the ship's capabilities. As for Nürnberg's particulars, she was built by the Deutsche Werke in Kiel and laid down in November 1933, launched in December 1934, and commissioned in November 1935. She had an official displacement of 6,000 tons, when in reality it was closer to 8,060 tons, and an operational displacement of 9,040 tons. As for machinery, she had 6 double-ended water tube boilers that provided steam for 1 high-pressure turbine and 2 low-pressure turbines, that drove 2 shafts that gave her a maximum shaft horsepower of 66,075 and a top speed of 32.3 knots, while the auxiliary diesel powered a third central shaft that could be used in unison. The armament consisted of a main battery of 9 15-centimeter guns and triple turrets, with 1 forward and 2 aft in a normal centerline arrangement, unlike the preceding K class. The anti-aircraft guns consisted of 8 88mm and 8 37mm anti-aircraft guns. This was subject to change throughout her career, including the addition of 105mm guns. She also carried 4 triple torpedo launchers, 2 on either side of the ship, along with an aircraft catapult behind the funnel. Her armor consisted of a maximum deck armor of 20mm and 25mm at the slopes, while the battle mast had 30mm, 50mm, and 100mm. Belt armor varied from 18mm to 50mm. Nürnberg differed from Leipzig in several ways, namely having thicker armor in the command tower, fire control, main battery turrets, barbettes, and foundations. Upon entering service on April 9, 1936, Nürnberg was appointed flagship of Vice Admiral BDA Commander Naval Scouting Forces, doing exercises and reviews until August 1936 when Nürnberg, in company with the Admiral Graf Spee and torpedo boats, relieved another German group for neutrality patrols off the southeastern coast of Spain, returning to Germany in early October and heading to Spain in November for a month-long patrol. The first 2 months of 1937 saw the ship being refit, followed by crew training and another patrol, this time off Cadiz. In May, she participated in maneuvers with the Luftwaffe and U-boats, and after relieving other ships in Spain, the ship returned to Germany in August. In September, more exercises were held as the Wehrmacht also exercised. In October, she had another planned refit that lasted late into November, which included a new radio as well as gunnery training following the refit. She was not out of dry dock long when another refit in December came. By the start of 1938, the ship was out of dry dock and carrying out more gunnery practice with the Luftwaffe and other exercises that lasted until March, where she then took part in a fleet review. At the end of March, she entered dry dock for a refit that lasted until June, and then she sailed for Norway on a training cruise, then exercised with other units of the fleet, including some of the old pre-dreadnoughts like Schleswig-Holstein, followed by gunnery drills with some other cruisers, and a review in July attended by Admiral Horthy, the Hungarian regent, followed by more fleet maneuvers in August and September. In December, she visited Kiel and attended the launch of the new aircraft carrier, Graf Zeppelin, and then ran speed trials over the measured mile in the Bay of Danzig. Early January 1939, she exercised by herself in the Baltic, and then represented the fleet at the launching of the battleship Bismarck. When Germany reincorporated Memel, she and other ships were sent as a show of power to the region and returned in late March. Following this, she did more exercises in the Baltic and visited Swedish ports, then large-scale exercises with other fleet units, following some gunnery practice with the other light cruisers, and a short engine overhaul. At the end of August 1939, Nürnberg was a flagship for Vice Admiral Dench with 38 vessels under his command, spread across the North and Central Baltic. Dench, Nürnberg, and the other ships under his command were there to prevent the escape of the small Polish navy. However, once it was obvious that the birds had flown, Nürnberg, Leipzig, destroyers, and torpedo boats began work mining the German Bight from the Dutch coast to the Skagerrak, as to extend the defensive Westfall seawards. This operation continued until the 20th of September, when Nürnberg returned to the Baltic. After a short refit, Vice Admiral Lutyens replaced Dench as BDA and hoisted his flag on Nürnberg, and along with Köln and 6 torpedo boats, came out of the mine barrier she had helped lay to meet 6 destroyers returning from a mine-laying operation in the Thames estuary, which was repeated several more times with less success, until the disastrous outcome on December 12th. Now, there should be an explanation why the light cruisers Nürnberg, Leipzig, and Köln were going to meet 5 destroyers and protect destroyers, since the cruisers rate higher than the destroyers. This can be boiled down to the fact that the 5 destroyers engaged in this operation were the only operational ones. The dangers of the North Sea to cruisers with the threat of British submarines were justified under several factors that range from the fact that British submarines had scored no hits thus far, and the morale of the crews suffers severely in the long run if they are always clear to sail but never receive the order to. 3 cruisers left at 5:30 p.m. on the 11th of December in a triangle formation, with Nürnberg in the top left of the triangle, Leipzig at the top right of the triangle, and Köln at the bottom of the triangle. The ship's aircraft were launched to carry out anti-submarine patrols. On the morning of the 12th, they saw the Danish steamer Charkov, and then later they were spotted by British aircraft that kept out of anti-aircraft range. The aircraft fired off a red flare at 11:20 a.m. The position of the approaching destroyers was determined by 2 HE-115 aircraft, which were to replace the shipboard aircraft that were sent away. At the moment where the destroyers were expected to appear over the horizon, disaster occurred. The codeword for the day was U for recognition, and the 2 HE-115s had spotted a submarine and repeatedly sent the letter U in Morse to warn of U-boats, even though U is not the proper signal to warn of U-boats. However, it was too late, and a torpedo struck Leipzig amidships. Board Nürnberg and Köln, who were watching from 1,200 meters distance, assumed that they had misidentified the aircraft and were coming under attack from aerial torpedoes, and began turning away, but 2 torpedoes were already spotted heading towards Nürnberg, and one of the 2 torpedoes struck Nürnberg's starboard side as the cruiser tried to maneuver out of the way. 3 more torpedoes were spotted trailing the cruiser, which all proceeded to explode on the seabed. The submarine in question that carried out this attack was identified as Salmon, as the wireless monitoring section soon found out, with 6 bow torpedoes, so the immediate threat was over. Following the hit, Nürnberg was forced to reduce her speed. Soon the 5 destroyers came to the aid of the 2 damaged cruisers and gave an anti-submarine screen. Before the destroyers arrived, between 12:12 and 12:22, 3 British bombers, ones that the destroyers had beaten off, began attacking Nürnberg. Through the skillful maneuvering of the ship and the heavy flak put up, the bombers were beaten off, and Nürnberg escaped damage. At 1:40, 3 destroyers were finally spotted after several failed attempts to make contact. 2 of the 5 destroyers were broken off as they were experiencing issues. They began to head towards Germany with low-flying aircraft and destroyers providing an anti-submarine screen. The damage to Nürnberg kept her out of the Norwegian campaign until June 3, 1940. After working up, she was escorted by torpedo boats to Trondheim. While on dock, Vice Admiral Schmutt was appointed BDA command, raising his flag on Nürnberg, and upon reaching Trondheim, disembarked. Between the 14th and 19th, Nürnberg helped in Operation Nora, where in company with destroyers and torpedo boats, helped escort the 3rd Mountain Division from Trondheim to a more northern part of the fjord. In late July, she and destroyers helped escort the battleship Gneisenau to Kiel, where on the way they were joined by torpedo boats. On August 1st, BDA command was changed to BDK command, or Commander-in-Chief of Cruisers, with Nürnberg remaining flagship over the remaining cruisers. After remaining on standby for Operation Sea Lion or the invasion of Britain, in December an operation to lay mines between the Kattegat and Skagerrak was cancelled due to unfavorable weather. In early 1941, German Naval High Command issued instructions reclassifying the 4 surviving light cruisers, Nürnberg, Köln, Leipzig, and Emden, as training ships with no more operational deployments from February 7, 1941 onwards. The command of the cruisers was transferred from Nürnberg. Nürnberg was still used in operations throughout the remainder of the war, including on June 22nd when she joined the Baltic Fleet for the campaign against the Soviet Union. On September 23rd, the battleship Tirpitz, Admiral Scheer, Nürnberg, Köln, and destroyers left Baltic ports to intercept the Soviet fleet in case they tried to intern themselves in Swedish ports. After realizing the Red Fleet had no intentions of doing this, Nürnberg returned to her duty as a training cruiser. 1942, refits to the cruiser saw upgrades to radar, and the ship was used as a training ship until November, when she was sent to Narvik to replace Admiral Scheer. Besides switching around ports, she was never used. In 1943, the ship was part of the order for all heavy units to be decommissioned, and again returned to Germany as a training ship in the Baltic. From 1944 onwards, any ship afloat was used as an escort for convoys as the situation for the German military became worse and worse. In early 1945, Nürnberg was used to lay mines off the southern tip of Norway, and then escorted refugee ships through the swept channels and ended up in Oslo on the 24th of January. And then she was called to Copenhagen, where she remained until the end of the war. Following the surrender of the German forces in northern Germany on May 5th, Danish resistance fighters attempted to seize the cruiser, and both sides suffered losses in a fierce gunfight in the docks of Copenhagen. Later on the 22nd, the ship was told to go to Wilhelmshaven, and then 2 days later, a convoy including the heavy cruisers HMS Devonshire, Prince Eugen, and HMS Dido along with destroyers left for Wilhelmshaven, entering the port on the 26th. According to the terms of the Potsdam Agreement, the victorious powers agreed the German fleet was to be shared amongst themselves by February 15, 1946. There were suspected attempts to scuttle the German ships by their crews to prevent them from reaching Allied control, especially Soviet. So, without prior notice, on December 18, 1945, the German ships were taken over. On January 2, 1946, Nürnberg, wearing the flag of Soviet Admiral, left Wilhelmshaven for the Soviet Union, only after encountering troubles with the locks. Eventually, Nürnberg reached Libau, where the German crews were taken off and returned to Wilhelmshaven. Nürnberg was renamed Admiral Makarov and used as a training ship by the Soviet Navy. The torpedo tubes, light flak, and searchlight platforms were removed, and Russian electronic equipment was installed. Other than that, her outward appearance remained the same. She served in the Soviet Navy until 1960, when she was decommissioned, making her the longest-serving Kriegsmarine cruiser. To close out the video, I think it is appropriate to quote Schmoke and Koop once again. The 5 later German light cruisers were children of their time, the result of what designers had found possible to engineer within the limitations of the Washington Agreement, and a vast improvement on Emden except as regards seaworthiness. The great weakness of the K cruisers, Königsberg, Kulm, and Karlsruhe, was their light construction. The fault lay not with the designers, but in the restrictions of the Versailles Treaty. Nürnberg, although not having a particularly exciting career, showed improvements to German light cruiser design when not as restricted, and even lasted the longest out of all the German cruisers that fought in World War II. Thank you all for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe as it will help the channel to grow.